Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Okay. Hello. Hey. How you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Wednesday, July 27th, 2022. Time for another show. All is well. Don't worry. I just I had this all of a sudden, well, just a small sense of, I don't know, I guess you would call it existential dread. I don't really know whether that is an accurate description of what I felt, but just that second before, all right, I'm committing myself for the next 2 hours here. But it's the same thing we do every day. And all of a sudden, it all vanished as I realized, so 2 hours of talking to friends about what's in the news. What could be better? It's actually pretty good. I don't know why that happens. It's like all of a sudden, 1 second, like, wouldn't I rather just lie down or something? No, you know what? Not really. If that were the case, how could I have done this otherwise? I realized, I think it dawned on me yesterday as I was post-show yesterday, I guess, seeing a tweet from our good friend Darwin, who had chimed in during yesterday's discussion before I even brought it around to the discussions later. In the end, having done, an hour and a half, who knows, on the Electoral Count Reform Act and how strong it was and where the weak points were and what am I worried about in the future, even if there is reform, etc., etc. He had tweeted, before we got to this, for all these machinations that these articles have got you twisted up in, it seems to all come together for one clear argument: it's time to get rid of the Electoral College. And lo and behold, we later did come around to exactly that in Jamel Bouie's article about, that raises the subject. I don't know if I want to say that the whole thing is really about the Electoral College. And then teased, and who knows whether I'll really be able to follow up on this or not, the articles in the American Prospect, getting rid of a couple other things too. Senates in general, state senates in particular in this article, but many people have floated the idea that the United States Senate is an idea that has outlived its usefulness. A lot of tinkering going on at various levels, but yeah, Darwin saw where it really should have ended up, and I'm glad we were on the same page, because it really would have been embarrassing to get to the end of this and then turn back and see his tweet and say, slap on the forehead, could have had a V8 moment. How old am I? Who would ever have had slapped themselves in the head, by the way, and said, oh my God, I didn't have a V8 and that's bad. I could have done that. All right. Never mind. It was always an age thing. Okay. Plenty of other stories to roll out today. One story in the news, this is kind of curious thing, as I realized as the seconds before the show ticked away, and I'm sure that it's in Greg's Roundup, and I have already started peeking at Greg's Roundup. Okay, I knew that would have to be in there. It's a kind of a basic bedrock story for a show like this, and I realized I didn't put this in Pocket anywhere because it's kind of like background noise to me, but it deserves more than that, obviously. But I guess when you're immersed in this stuff forever, the news that the Justice Department now acknowledges investigating Trump in a criminal investigation over his actions on January 6th, and I guess the surrounding days and the plots leading up to it and the plots leading out from it, and how we could all plots just hearing about it, every day. But I don't know. I was like unmoved by it. Like, of course they should be investigating. Thank God they're finally owning up to it, I guess. And I couldn't decide whether to treat this like, hallelujah, we finally brought Merrick Garland around, or were we going to be treated to stories of, well, you're so dumb, because obviously Merrick Garland was looking at this the whole time, but he was just holding his cards close to the vest, and I told you that this was happening. On the other hand, I did see a counter spin of, well, I've been telling you this whole time that if the Justice Department really were investigating Trump criminally, they wouldn't be able to keep it from leaking at some point. The fact that it is leaked now tells me that the investigation is something that they were dragged into doing finally, and they've finally begun starting it. And, they may have delayed leaking it for some time, but that it wasn't something that they've been investigating for a year and has only leaked now. That's difficult to argue with. So, all right, well, why would I argue with it when I can bring Greg Dworkin on to argue with it instead? I feel like that tone today jumped in at the right time to say, hello, I'd like to book an argument. So I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. And it's really more of a discussion than anything else. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Oh, wait a minute. This isn't argument. This is abuse.
Oh, that must have been what was going on in that 1 second before the show started. Like, I felt like there was abuse going on, but it really wasn't. Okay.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Argument is over there. So the thing is that the Justice Department has had Mark Meadows' phone texts since April. April. So the idea that Garland was pushed into this by the January 6th committee doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They've been working on this. They're methodical. They're slow. What they're not very good at is public relations, and that's because they go out of their way to say that what they do needs to be done in private to protect people who, for example, might be investigated but completely innocent.
Yeah, well, there aren't any here, but okay.
So it's not fair to talk about, you're under investigation. That's a charge.
Yes.
That's, in fact, what Donald Trump wanted. He wanted his Justice Department to say...
Yes, right, true. Yeah, okay, I got you. Right.
That something is not clear and it's under investigation because we don't know what's going on with this election. But, that in and of itself sets up public perception, and therefore you want to avoid that. So the thing that Merrick Garland did, and again, people who know him say that what he's been doing the last 48, 72 hours, interviews with CNN, an interview with Lester Holt on NBC last night that I saw, for Garland to come out in public like this and say, no one is above the law in very measured terms, is the Merrick Garland equivalent of Howard Beale opening up the window and screaming, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. He's so measured that when he says stuff like this, that's equivalent to raising his voice. So I'm not saying, he's always been doing everything right. What I am saying is a whole lot going on that we don't know about, that we're only now beginning to find out about. For example, Greg Jacob and Mark Short, both of whom testified in front of the January 6th committee and the public, have been subpoenaed by a federal grand jury in D.C., and they're honing in on the fake elector scheme. Also implicated in that, according to the New York Times and Washington Post, who are talking about emails that they've obtained, is Carrie Lake, the gubernatorial candidate in Arizona, who basically said, what we should do is we should field our own electors and basically not tell the Democrats so we can surprise them. So she knew about it, and one of the Trump lawyers for trying to set this up essentially said, look, we know they're fake. They even use the word fake with scare quotes.
Yeah. Wow.
And then said later, maybe we should call them alternative electors with a smiley face.
That's right.
So they have this stuff. They're building a case. It takes time. What I am persuaded by is the argument that you really need to be careful and methodical here, because if you put Trump on trial, if you indict him and then he gets away with it, that's terrible.
Yes, you want to be, you always want to be careful about building a case that's realistic and prosecutable. But yeah, there is that added danger, although, at this point it's pretty clear that you're getting to well worth it territory, just because part of what Trump is banking on is not being charged at all. So, I think it deflates him a bit to charge him. But he's always sort of believed he operated above the law. So, but it would be very dangerous to fuel that. That's true. So don't. Stick him with a pitchfork instead.
Well, somebody in a different context reminded me of this of the great actor Jason Robards, who played Ben Bradley in the All the President's Men.
Yes.
And was talking with Woodwards and Bernstein about whether or not they should go ahead and publish a story about John Mitchell, the corrupt attorney general, a reminder that there have been corrupt attorney generals before. Nixon's corrupt attorney general, who later went to jail. And John Mitchell wanted the Post to kill his story and basically called up Woodward and said, if you publish this, then Katharine Graham is going to get her tits caught in a ringer.
Really?
That was the quote.
Well.
And Jason Robart said, well, it's a family paper, cut the tits out, but go with this baby.
Wow.
And as he was discussing this with Bernstein in the movie, he's saying, look, I don't trust anybody. Do you trust your sources? I don't trust you. I don't trust them. But, hey, look, you got to go. You got to go. And let me tell you a story about when I was a reporter. I was a young reporter, and I was putting a story in about LBJ picking somebody else besides J. Edgar Hoover to be head of the FBI.
That wasn't
and LBJ got a hold of this and knew that I was going to publish this. And so he appointed J. Edgar Hoover as FBI president for life.
Okay, yes.
And then turned to his chief aide and said, get a hold of Bradley and tell him to go F himself.
Oh. Okay.
And so for years, everybody kept saying, you're the one that stuck us with J. Edgar Hoover. You screwed up. And Bradley's point is, I did screw up, but I wasn't wrong.
Well, okay.
So you got to be careful. You got to not screw up. You got to not be wrong. And Merrick Garland's doing all of that. And there's just so much information there. I think what the January 6th committee is doing is pushing him to go a little more public. What it's not doing is pushing him to do his job, which he was doing anyway.
Well, okay. That seems like a fair supposition, at least. Yeah, I've really been able to glean from all of this is, all right, I'm definitely on board with the we don't know theory, because I don't. So
yeah,
there you
I
go.
don't. We don't. And just assuming that, this is just more evidence that whatever I used to think or always thought is true, fine. But, there's plenty of evidence that they've been working on this for a while.
Yeah. Well,
they didn't just come up with
know.
bringing in Mark Short and Greg Jacob. That takes time.
Yeah, all right. I mean, I enjoyed the having 3-4 different possible explanations or spins for what was going on. And to me, the priors that reconfirmed was, I still don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun discussion.
Yeah.
Did you do the right thing because you were always doing the right thing? Did you do the right thing because the committee pushed you into doing it? Did you do the right thing for some other reason? I don't care. You did the right thing.
Well, that's true. If you end up on the right thing, that's good. Lots of what we cover is people doing the right thing out of a feeling of self-preservation. Well,
yeah,
okay, that
and so I'll
helps
give
too.
you an example of that.
Okay.
A completely different context. Matt Gaetz. What happened is that Trump and Mike Pence had dueling rallies in Washington.
Oh, what?
Bizarrely enough.
Really?
As people know,
Pence
it's
rally?
not surprising Trump came back to Washington. The criminal always comes back to the scene of the crime.
Right.
So,
Pence rally.
because this
Can't
is
even
all
imagine
about
what that's
criminal
like.
conspiracy here. And that's why the headline for the Pundit Roundup this morning is writing down a criminal conspiracy isn't just good television.
Nah.
I mean, Trump's aides were doing this, and so justice got a hold of these things. So Trump has a rally, says some bizarre things, basically going all authoritarian. It's not even news anymore. But was news was that Mike Pence had a rally. First of all,
that is unusual.
the fact that Mike Pence is delusional enough to think he has a chance in this party, Republican Party, of actually becoming president, that, or as somebody put it, Mike Pence really thinks he's going to be the nominee of the Hang Pence Party.
That is a terminal optimist. Wow.
Terminal is the operative word there.
Right. I mean, it was.
So, the idea that that's going to work. So essentially, Pence gives this really bland speech about, you have to look not in the past, but toward the future.
Twirling.
Wink, wink,
toward
nudge,
the-
nudge, nudge.
Okay.
You're supposed to understand what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Right. And so Pence, being the coward that he is, didn't really say anything important. But his very existence is the story. So while this is going on at Trump's
that's true.
rally, or at least in some kind, I don't actually know where he said it. I didn't see that part. But Matt Gaetz made the point that there's rhinos and then there's like real people. So the rhino rally isn't really going to account for anything. After all, Mike Pence is never going to be president. He's a good guy, but he's no leader, and he's never going to be president.
Oh, he was briefly.
So the same Mark Short, who was up in front of the DOJ grand jury in Washington, was asked by Aaron Burnett on CNN, what do you think about Gaetz' remarks? And I don't know if you have anything queued up to play.
I did. I saw your note that there was something worth playing, and I believe I've queued it. This is Matt Gaetz, right?
Yeah, can you play it? This is Mark Short talking about Gaetz.
Ah, okay. So, and Gaetz is talking at at a turning point action, like that. That's what's the
turning
Charlie
point
Kirk
action,
thing.
youth movement.
Yeah. Oh, that was right. They let him around kids, which is
That's
astonishing.
part of the point. So
okay. Have I ruined something? Okay. Let's play it.
On that note,
There's
let me
Gaetz.
just say what everybody here knows. Mike Pence will never be president. Nice guy, not a
All
leader.
right. That's what you were telling us about.
Mark?
Oh, Mark Short
Well,
here. Okay.
I don't know if Mike Pence will run for president in 2024, but I don't think Matt Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking by 2024.
There you go.
And I'm actually surprised that Florida law enforcement still allows him to speak to teenage conferences like that. So I'm not too worried about Matt Gaetz.
Okay, so
thought
yeah,
that was a
there
pretty
it
good
is.
comeback.
Okay. I stepped on Mark Short. Sorry, Mark. I didn't
Well, that's
know
okay. So the idea.
that. Good call, Mark. Okay.
Yeah, good call. So the idea that, there's nothing wrong with the Republican Party. There's no splits in the Republican Party. Look, there are.
Yes.
And we're not just talking about never Trumpers or people who used to work for Trump who now want to write a book. We're talking about people like Mark Short and others deeply involved in the Mike Pence vice presidency, who were doing things like privately, without you knowing about it, testifying to the grand jury, and publicly that you do know about, appearing in front of the January 6th committee, and now just simply going on CNN and absolutely torching people like Matt Gaetz.
Yeah. Well, he certainly deserves it, and I'm.
Now that doesn't mean that
waiting on that one.
as some people, I think it was Yamiche Alcindor said something to the effect of, this isn't really a civil war in the Republican Party. It's more like a skirmish because the Trump side is so obviously far ahead. I think of it more as a guerrilla action here.
The Gorilla Channel.
The guerrilla chat, except the
other kind.
the alternate spelling.
The British spelling. Well, we'll blame
The
it on
guerrilla channel here, where the guerrilla action is to try to do these raids, and it's going to have its impact. It's going to have its effect. And again, there's a certain degree of the party, even if it's only 20%, that won't accept Trump and really would like to look at people like DeSantis and other people going on. I don't fear DeSantis as much as I do Trump, because DeSantis has absolutely zero charisma. He's actually emotionally challenged, and if you actually see him and try to work with him or around him, he is like one of these people that I can't believe somebody elected this guy. He's awful to actually try and work with. It's like talking to a stone wall, in terms of the emotional impact you get. It's very, very different than Trump. He can't light up a rally. The reason they have these provocative clips of him is that if they showed him for like 20 minutes at a time, it's like, can we turn the channel already?
Okay.
And that's important when you're running.
True. It becomes
Now,
important.
his policies, because he's so bad, he's one of the people I think that would be like Chuck Mastriano, one of the running in Pennsylvania, one of the people in the Republican Party who would simply ban the traditional press and only give interviews to outlets like Fox News. I would have added, and OAN, except OAN's not going to be around. The New York Times has a headline today: possible death blow as conservative network loses TV carriers. Future of One American News. which established itself as a powerful voice in conservative media by promoting some of the most outlandish falsehoods about the 2020 election. And if you're worried that the New York Times can't get itself to say lies, the actual subheader here is OAN amplified the lies on the 2020 election. So they went there. Brent Staples, New York Times reporter, tweeted that and said, always call lies by their rightful names. So the point is, they are losing 3.5 million cable subscribers. They count on that revenue, and they may not be there by the time the 2024 election comes out.
Okay, well that would be good because they were getting
unless they're going
tremendous
to be
amount of
funded
money
by
out of
Russia.
those deals. I guess they could always turn to that, eh?
Well, what's the difference?
Or any
how would it affect
pass-through
how they cover
billionaire. I don't see how. I mean, except I suppose they would do more propaganda about Ukraine. But
I don't know.
They're probably already on that beat. But I mean, I guess we'd hear more from them on that. Okay, so they'll have to look for new handouts because of how free market and non-socialist they are.
Yep.
So got it.
So you got all that stuff. So let's see what else I wanted to talk about. I'm also looking at not just the conduct of Trump and how that's going, but also its effects down ballot. And this is a really interesting conversation that's going on. Should Democrats spend a little money locally? Local decisions. Remember, I always saying, it's got to be a 50-state strategy, and you have to let the locals decide what works. So the locals say, okay, we're going to promote people like Doug Mastriano because we think we can beat him. And we're going to promote Blake Masters, who sounds like a invented, country club golfer in Arizona, because we think we can beat him, and so on and so forth. And in places like Maryland. So, whether or not that is a good idea or not a good idea, the New York Times and others have decided that it's a good idea to go ask the January 6th committee whether the Democratic Party should be promoting election deniers and liars for crass political purposes because they think they can win.
They asked the January 6th committee members this? Okay.
Yes. And some of the January 6th committee members said, I don't know if it's such a great idea. And so therefore, look, we have a split here in the January 6th committee over what should be, as if that's the focus of what they're doing. It's ridiculous, idiotic reporting. So it's obvious if you want to get a split, you just get somebody to comment and then you can go with this headline. That's not really the point.
You want to split, interview two people.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Republicans are picking the extremists, not the Democrats. Republicans would be picking these extremists regardless. What the Democrats are doing, locally at least, if they think it can work, is trying to tie those extremists to Donald Trump. And people will step back and say, they're secretly promoting them because, look, they're tying them to Donald Trump, and that's going to get them a win. And that must be because they want to run against him. Well, the other alternative explanation is, it looks like they're going to win, so we might as well start defining early as to who they are.
I guess that's true.
We thought that was a good strategy. We didn't think it was going to be a national story about how Democrats are interfering with Republican primaries. How can you describe Donald Trump and Doug Mastriano as existential threats to American democracy and then go ahead and support them with money?
Yeah, well, the money.
Well, because, Americans have the attention span of a cockroach. That's how.
Yes. Being American myself. What did you say?
Right? I mean, it's, everything else is, this will never stick. Well, this won't matter. Well, people won't remember. This is something they're going to remember months and months. Why? Why would they remember this and not those other things?
Press tends to pick and choose among those things.
They do. I mean, they're angling for a story because they want your eyeballs. It's got nothing to do with reality. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they want my eyeballs.
The reality.
Terrible.
The Republicans are picking terrible candidates, period.
Yes.
Right? We have that in the Senate. Here's a Politico story. Herschel Walker's fumbles highlight GOP's rocky Senate roster. Even if the Trump-backed Republican nominee in Georgia can get back on script, the party has potential worries in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. B.J.D. Vance, Mehmet Oz, New Jersey resident, and the aforementioned country club golfer Blake Masters.
Yeah,
they're all nutcases, all of them.
Yes.
In fact, in Arizona, Carrie Lake, the gubernatorial candidate, was implicated in the emails, as we said, to try to get in on the fake elector scheme. The guy who in Michigan is running for governor in the Michigan GOP primary yet to be decided, who was arrested for being at the January 6th insurrection, is actually now in third place. And Eric Reitens, who is running for Senate in Missouri, is also now in third place because new allegations from his ex-wife about his abuse have been dominating the stories there. So, as a matter of fact, the leading candidate in Missouri is the Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, who's also a right-wing nutjob, but he's much more savvy and traditional about it. As Attorney General, he kept suing Biden about stuff that had nothing to do with Missouri. Like, I'm going to sue Biden about border policy. Why? Because it makes headlines. I'm going to sue Biden about something else that has nothing to do with Missouri. Why? Because it makes headlines. So he's going to be the leading candidate. And it's Missouri, so he might win. Sure. But Eric Reitens will not. And I will say, from a personal point of view, I would never give money to any Democrat who's trying to boost Eric Reitens, because he's such a horrible person. I wouldn't go near that. I don't care if you think it would help you in the local election. Is that true for Mastriano? Probably. Would I take the approach of supporting these people in order to get a win? No. But is it awful? Well, it depends, again, what you're doing. If you take the position that what we're really doing is trying to define them as to who they are, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's true. And where it becomes problematic, and okay, so there's certain strategies you'll agree with and certain that you won't. It becomes problematic when you're taking donated dollars and moving them into...
Do you agree with me, or do we have a split on Kagro in the morning?
I don't know. Well, let's see. We'll find out after the break. But for the meantime, you can absolutely...
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. You see, I have a story right here. We don't have unanimous agreement on Kagro in the morning.
Yeah, two people thought two different things about it, even if they were essentially the same. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've resolved the issues. I'm going to use the Liz Cheney trick of addressing a slightly different question or slightly different angle on the question, one that I prefer more. Is there a split in the Kagro in the Morning Show on the Democratic strategy? And the answer will be no. I will say the real story here isn't what Democrats do and don't decide to do. All of that is comes too late in the story. The real decision point and the real issue that you should be focusing on is every single one of these nutcases all had the opportunity to there's two major parties in this country, and any one of them could have run for the nomination for the office that they're now seeking in either party, and 100% of the nutcases chose the Republican Party to spew their nonsense. That's where the problem begins. What Democrats decide to do, given the fact that every one of these people has said being a Republican is the ticket to being a lunatic in public office, that's what I'm going to try to do. It doesn't matter what Democrats do afterwards. These people have declared themselves, and we're just observing at this point.
And not just that, but there's been active intervention on the Republican side. So here's from that Political article talking about Herschel Walker's fumble. Remember, Walker had something to do with football in Georgia. Republicans are taking
Allegedly.
an exceedingly light touch in their Senate primaries to mixed results. Four high-profile governors passed up campaigns: Chris Sununu of New Hampshire, Doug Ducey of Arizona, Larry Hogan of Maryland, and Phil Scott of Vermont, and they've had to contend with the former president's efforts to play kingmaker. Trump encouraged Walker to run in Georgia, J.D. Vance and Oz in Ohio and Pennsylvania, but at the same time, Republicans have not nominated a candidate who's a surefire bet to lose a potential battleground, as they did in the Maryland and Illinois gubernatorial races. GOP voters spurned Democrats' attempts to boost far-right candidate against Michael Bennet in Colorado. Former Missouri Governor Eric Greitens' toxic candidacy appears to be fading, and Pennsylvania's GOP electorate rejected bomb thrower Kathy Barnett. Well, that you can't use Pennsylvania as an example because they nominated Doug Mastriano. On top of these upsides, most Republicans see Nevada as their best pickup opportunity. But while the GOP Super PAC Leadership Fund is set to outspend its Democratic rival, candidate fundraising can make a huge difference. And in Ohio, Tim Ryan dramatically outraised and outspent Vance, while polling in the state Trump won by 8 points hasn't shown Vance with a commanding lead. And Fetterman continues to lead in polling, fundraising, and favorability in Pennsylvania. So there are issues there. Rob Portman thinks Vance will win anyway because Ohio's redder than it used to be. Pat Toomey said concerns about Oz trailing Fetterman is misplaced hand-wringing.
Oh, dear.
And Republican voters are all going to coalesce around it. Arizona and New Hampshire could reshape the map. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I will say one of the things that's notable, and this was in the Washington Examiner, is that Democrats are flat out outraising Republicans for the 2022 elections. And in fact, the headline here from the Washington Examiner, Republicans blame drop in online GOP grassroots fundraising on inflation and Trump. Inflation publicly and Trump privately.
I see. I mean, I know they want to talk about inflation, but...
Right. As the economy eats away at purchasing power, something has to go by the wayside, said Zach Moffett, CEO of Targeted Victory, a Republican consulting firm that specializes in digital fundraising. They're the ones that send you those dearest one, please send us our money, give us your bank account, and we'll split whatever we have with you once we get out of Nigeria. They're the ones responsible for those emails, I think. Targeted Victory maintains a house file of online donors. The firm discovered through periodic polling that these grassroots Republicans have reduced discretionary budgets for political giving in response to inflation. We do these massive 3,000-person surveys to our donor file. The verbatim response has been, it's gas or this. It's vacation or this. Republican insiders interviewed for the story were more guarded when discussing the Trump factor, fearing reprisals by the former president. Granted anonymity, they unloaded.
Okay. I mean, they're saying that their interviews of random donors included people who thought that the president would target them for their answers?
No, the people who were doing the interviews targeting the donors.
I see.
Think the president will turn on them.
Oh, okay. Well, he will.
The president will turn on Targeted Victory if they really talk honestly about what they're finding out.
Okay. Well, that's...
But we already know that. Sarah Longwell and others, Frank Luntz, have run focus groups where Trump voters don't want Trump to run again.
Yeah.
We know that.
Okay, I mean, I don't know. Well, it's fine by me if they live in that paranoid world. And he might, if he ever hears their name or sees it on TV that they said this.
Look, they're blaming this on inflation like they blame everything on inflation. The fact of the matter is that as gas prices go down, you're not going to see Republican small donor contributions go up.
Not like
it's not going to happen.
Go on vacation.
The people who gave like that are interested in Trump and Trump only. Trump is not running in 2022. It doesn't matter who he endorses.
Yeah.
And you can't, it's not fungible. You can't just say, okay, you wanted me, I'm telling you vote for these people. You wanted to give money to me, I'm not telling you to give money to them. Give money to me, is what Trump says.
Right.
And so, it's just stupid. It's not inflation. It's the whole way things are constructed.
Yeah, I mean,
Trump is about Trump, and all his money grabs are like whatever it is, whether it's a charity or anything else. Don't give to them, give to me. And so Democrats are far outraising Republicans. And so you could look at polls, you can look at generic ballots, you can try to make something out of it. You can say younger liberal Democrats are disappointed in Biden because after all is said and done, he's still old, they're young. They don't think he's fighting for the things that they want in a 50-50 Senate with Joe Manchin and a conservative Supreme Court that shoots down all his executive orders, and therefore they'll blame Biden and are disappointed with Biden. Well, what does that mean? Are they going to vote for Republicans now? No.
I don't know. It's a very
Climate
bizarre...
change is my biggest issue. So you're going to vote for Republicans now?
No.
Climate deniers? Come on. Get serious about this.
The whole thing is weird right from the beginning. And, all right, so I understand that the program is for them to blame things on inflation. But, I mean, did they not even... I guess they didn't even... What do they care, right? They're going to get the headlines. They don't have to explain how Democrats are somehow inflation-proof.
Right. So, the idea that Democrats are interfering with the Republican primaries. Well, are Democrats interfering with Republican fundraising?
Yes.
Republicans are choosing
putting inflation
the extremists. Republican fundraising is down. That's no coincidence. The conservative Supreme Court that Republicans picked not only has done away with Roe, and at the same time, Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court has talked about contraception and other things might go to say, and same-sex marriage should be looked at as well. So they're talking about Obergefell and Griswold. Well, for those of you who are fans of, I can't remember the issue, but I only remember the Supreme Court cases they're named after. Not
bad.
The things,
sounds smart. Yeah.
Right? The things that Republicans are doing are not popular, and because they're not popular, that's why they're not getting massive fundraising over it.
That could be it. And because they're not popular, there's inflation somehow. I don't know.
Here's an example.
It doesn't make any sense.
And this is, again, you could be pessimistic or optimistic, but the fact is you don't know. This is from National Journal's Natalie Jackson. Only 8 House Republicans voted for something 3/4 of the party support. Republicans are increasingly betting their votes will fly under the radar, and they might be right for now. Right, which is an ongoing theme about American voters having the memory span, attention span, and memory, not of an elephant, but of a cockroach. The House of Representatives held 2 major votes last week designed to protect existing rights enshrined by Supreme Court decisions, but Clarence Thomas targeted in his concurring opinion in Dobbs v. Jackson, Women's Health Organization, ensuring that states recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states and guaranteeing access to contraception. Both bills were passed by bipartisan majorities, and some Republicans supported each, but the numbers showed that in each case, elected Republicans are not representing their voters. 47 Republicans, 22 of 211, voted in favor of protecting same-sex marriages, even if the 2015 Obergefell v. Hodges decision is ultimately overturned. About half of Republicans support same-sex marriage. Just 8 House Republicans voted to protect contraception access. 4% of the caucus.
Yes.
Now, the right to birth control was hardly controversial. The issue was settled in the 1965 Griswold v. Connecticut decision, and Gallup polling shows that 92% of Americans say contraception is morally acceptable. A PRRI survey shows that 77% of Republicans oppose laws restricting what types of birth control are available. And the vast majority of the Republican caucus voted against protecting access to this basic aspect of health care.
Yes.
Right? So it's not based on age. PRRI data support hovers around 45% among Republicans over age 65. There's no substantial differences by age or gender among Republicans when it comes to support for access to birth control. There's something of a split on religion. But the religious issue, the religious hold on the party can't fully explain a lack of support for either issue. Neither can Senator Marco Rubio's comment that the same-sex marriage bill is a stupid waste of time. As many have pointed out, including Pete Buttigieg, I would add. It takes just as long to vote against something as for it.
True, right?
Right. Thomas telegraphed loud and clear that these rights are under threat. Why should we give his opinion so much weight? Because Roe wasn't supposed to be under threat. That's why. for nearly 50 years. Overturning Roe was a stated goal on the right, one ultimately accomplished. We should probably believe people in power when they say they want to overturn stuff. But that said, Republican office holders are betting that these are not big enough issues among their voters to cost them support in the midterm elections.
It's typically a good bet in terms of attention span for people, but
Right.
they are, I guess, as close to kitchen table issues or bedroom issues anyway as you can get, and a lot of people will take it personally. And I know a lot of people, it has registered with some people, not everyone. A lot of people are still more tuned to, whatever's on American Idol or whatever. But I did see in the last couple of days somebody collecting screenshots of conversations going on, in this case, among conservatives on Reddit, discussing the contraception bill, and all of the comments that they captured anyway were of conservatives saying, I don't really get it. I read I figured there must be some poison pill in the bill, and that would be the reason you'd have to vote against it. So I actually got the text and I read it, and there's nothing in there. I mean, I agree with 100% of what's in there. Why are all the Republicans voting no? And, that's interesting that it's a conversation among 10 conservatives on Reddit. I hope it's being talked about among more of them. But
well, the way to get it
everyone.
talked about is to make it a campaign issue.
Yes.
And so it's up to the Democrats to do that.
True.
So
Can't we
Natalie
have the
Jackson
Republicans do it
finishes
to
this
troll
piece
us?
by saying, I generally try to avoid predictions, but if the day comes that access to birth control isn't guaranteed, I'm very comfortable predicting there'll be a backlash. Basically making the point that it's one thing to set aside same-sex marriage based on the numbers in the American population. It's quite another thing with women, who are a much larger percentage of voters than
Yes.
Issues involved with same-sex marriage.
Right.
So,
That's
morally,
true. I mean,
you need to do what you need to do. And I'm not making the case that one is superior to the other. What I'm saying is, when you're talking about practical aspects of who it affects, contraception and access to it affects everybody.
yes.
And so issues that
True.
affect everybody generally, have a bigger appeal to the electorate when it comes to voting. And so that's all. And so she's predicting a backlash if they go that far. Now, Republicans are saying that, it's not a big deal. We don't need to do this. But after Roe/Dobbs, I don't think they can get away with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
At least not if their opponents make it an
Seems to
issue.
be
Oh, yeah,
catching
you
on.
said this. Well, but look what just happened.
yes, and now they have the
And
vote.
then on the one hand, we know what happened. On the other hand, we know what Thomas said. Clarence Thomas said these things. So we have both of these, and these are facts.
Yes. And if you're running against a Republican incumbent, Clarence Thomas said these things, you were given a chance to say, that's a dumb thing, and you instead
So
said,
are you going to vote
"That's
against
a good
it if
thing."
it comes up? Let's come
you've
down to
now
it. We're
not
having a
voted.
debate here.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we're going to see a lot of, Republicans aren't going to debate. Republicans aren't going to let traditional media in anymore. Republicans aren't going to debate. Who said we have to debate? League of Women Voters? That is so 20th century. We don't have to
we
do
hate
this.
those voters. They
We're not
should
gonna do it.
take
We're
their
not gonna
league
have a
and get
debate.
the hell out of here. Yeah. Well, that's true. They can do that. I don't know. We'll see how it works. I hope very poorly. And again, half of the population says, I don't know how attached women are to the League of Women Voters and their debates. I don't know that they would take it as an anti-woman position not to show up and debate. But a lot of people will take it as an anti-American campaign, and our idea of democracy idea to not show up to debate.
It's up to the
they may
Democrats to say,
see-
look, my cowardly opponent doesn't want to debate because
Yeah.
they're afraid to tell you they want to take contraception away from you.
Yeah, I wouldn't debate if that was the position I was stuck with.
And
I guess
how do
I
you
wouldn't show
know
up.
it's not their position? Well, they won't debate, so you can't ask them. I'm
Right.
telling you, that's what it is.
Yeah, and I mean that's
Let them
essentially
deny
it.
it.
You're not supposed to be willing to take this risk, right? They might be secretly pro contraception, but the fact that they're not showing up to say so, and or that they cast a vote that says the exact opposite.
And if you think that I'm mischaracterizing their position, go ahead and ask them.
Yeah,
on record.
you can't.
Keep
They won't let
asking
you
them.
in.
You don't have to do it at a debate. Go ahead and interview them. Oh, they don't want to interview you? I'm telling you. Not only do they not want to debate, they won't let reporters answer this question. I'm telling you what their position is.
Yeah. Also, though, if you happen to corner them, beware of the answer that that thing you want is not contraception, since we now have that. The thing you're describing, that wouldn't be an abortion. Why not? Because that's what gets me out of here. Yeah,
because we say so. Because we're going to change the terms of what we're discussing. That's okay. Just if you have them interviewed time after time after time. At least one of the reporters are going to get it right and start asking some good follow-up questions. So will you say on the record, sir, ma'am, whatever, that this is where you stand?
Okay, we should maybe import some British reporters. They spell everything wrong, but on TV it won't matter.
Yeah, but they get it right.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other big thing out there that I think is just gathering steam isn't just the Justice Department investigating Trump's actions in a January 6th criminal probe. But it's what's going on with the Secret Service. This is Carol Lennox, Secret Service expert in the Washington Post. Key Democrats want DHS Inspector General removed from the Secret Service probe. Okay. Remember, this is the IG that sat on this information that the texts were lost for months and didn't tell the committee.
Okay.
So a pair of key congressional Democrats called on Department of Homeland Security Inspector General Joseph Kafari to step aside from his office's investigation into the Secret Service on Tuesday, saying the Trump appointee knew earlier than has been reported that the agency deleted text messages. Okay. Carolyn Maloney, who heads the House committee that oversees Inspectors General, and Benny Thompson, chair of the House, the January 6th committee. Remember, Liz Cheney's not the chair, Benny Thompson is. Said the Inspector General's office admitted in congressional briefings it became aware the agent's text messages were erased in December, 2 months earlier than reported. But he didn't report that to Congress until this month.
Yes. Okay.
These and other omissions have broken their faith in Kafari's ability to lead the investigation, and they want the Council of Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency, an independent entity in the executive branch. Did you know they existed? I didn't know they existed. To appoint another Inspector General to handle Secret Service probe.
All right.
Is there like an Inspector General school? Do they have Inspector General job fairs?
I guess.
Do you go to Indeed and say, I need a new Inspector General? I mean, how does this work?
There are a lot of Inspectors General out there, that's for sure. More than I expected. And I guess every department has 10, I don't know, maybe a couple in the freezer. But okay, I gather that whenever there's a bunch of them like that, I guess they'll have an organization. So, not terribly surprising, I guess, but it's still silly sounding when you find out about it.
Huh.
Well, okay, they need a new one because, the Secret Service, not supposed to be that damn secret, for one thing. It's leading to a lot of crazy speculation that we shouldn't have to sit through, that in order to have decided that it was better to take the heat for deleting all of this stuff than to let anybody know what was actually being texted, makes you real suspicious about, what was being texted.
Right.
Even though
exactly.
I've also seen something that says, well, there might not have been a whole lot of text because it's supposedly Secret Service policy that you not communicate that way. And I would have thought that they had no time for texting. They're busy looking around for jittery people. But
so I'm trying to, as people remind us about how traditional journalism handles these things. I'm trying to figure out how to exactly phrase this. The committee and other important committees have lost faith in this particular Inspector General because the Secret Service is baselessly claiming that none of this is malicious and it doesn't look bad and they have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah, well, it does look bad. You can claim it's
in other words,
malicious.
they're lying, but how do we say that they're lying without saying they're lying?
Well, I don't know. I thought at the beginning of the show we were all about you got to say that they're lying. The newspapers can say that. I suppose the committee has to be more careful.
we have a quota for lying headlines. We're only allowed one a week, so we already used it. Now we have to. We can't just keep saying lying. That would seem like we're taking sides, as if Truth and Justice has sides.
Right. Well, I don't know.
Speaking of which, it reminds me of another story, which isn't worth spending all that much time in, but it was just really annoying. The Washington Post had a headline the other day about how Biden was poised for wins in Congress coming up, while Politico on the same day had stories about Democrats running out of time to pass legislation.
Well,
and I'm trying to think, well, how could both of these things be true at the same time? Well,
Can't
they certainly could be. It's
Yeah.
nuanced. But one outlet wants to give you an idea of what's going on in Congress, and the other outlet
yes.
just wants to have a Republican point of view that Democrats can't get anything done.
Right. Okay, that's a good point. I see you now. Because there are things that that Democrats are poised to pass, and then after that, there won't be very much time. Okay, they can coexist, but yeah, the choice of headlines. Yes. Now you're talking. Now you have a point there. Okay. Well, that's Politico for you. That's the thing that they do.
Yep, it is.
What was the first headline from?
They're just genetically incapable of putting Democrats in a positive light. They can't.
Yeah.
So, this is what they have to do. No, we're just being totally nonpartisan, and all you partisans really think. No, come on. We read you all the time. We know what's going on here.
Yeah. All right. I mean, what was the first headline? Who did the one about poised for victories?
Oh, I'll find it for you. I actually took a screenshot and set it aside.
My guess is that they're not usually predisposed to give Democrats the benefit of the doubt either.
Yasmin Abu Talib and Mike DeMonis
from
Washington Post.
Well, okay. I mean, certainly people accuse the Post headline writers of doing the wrong thing every once in a while too, but they were right on target with the lie subheader. Or was that the New York Times? Dang. All right.
That was the New York Times.
At any rate, Politico is certainly more about politics as game, and they're more inclined to bring up the fact that, we're running out of time, and the supposedly strategic angle of this thing versus, hey, we could tell you what's happening here. They're not Congress,
the two
they're
exact
Politico.
headlines. I had the screenshots of them because they just bothered me, so I took them.
Yeah.
The Washington Post says Biden poised for big wins in Congress, while Politico at the same time says time is not on Democrats' side.
Yeah. Okay. But I suppose that fits the character of the papers and what they consider themselves to be. The Washington Post, generally a newspaper, tell you what happened in Congress and what's going to happen, and if they can, why. And Politico,
it's not terrible.
Is it so
Normally
crazy
I wouldn't
it just
mind,
might work?
but I'm just pointing out all of their stories are like that.
That's what they do. They are politics as games. They're horse race.
The fact is, this horse race, that's exactly right. We're talking about policy here.
Yeah.
Both papers are playing it like horse race stuff. These are things that are going to help people.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
You have the Affordable Care Act passing. Millions of people now get health insurance.
Yeah.
Poised to get a win. That's not the major thing that happened. The thing that happened is people have been helped by policy.
Yes. That seems true. But so boring. Because you can't decide who wins. Millions of people win. Why not? I don't know. They're very excited about declaring millions of people the person of the year.
So which of those million people are running? How is that a horse race?
Right. We don't know what to do with that. You'll be able to huge weight off your shoulders. You'll be able to go to the doctor, take your kids to the doctor.
Anyway, so is the January 6th committee actually having an effect? Let me give you this CNN poll that just came out, and that'll finish up my segment here. Do you think that Trump's public statements leading up to the January 6th attack on the Capitol encouraged political violence? Yes, no. Yes. Voters, 60-40, yes.
Okay.
Democrats, 94-6, yes. GOP, 20-79, yes. That's 20% of the GOP that agree.
Okay.
Independents, 66-34. Liberals, 91-9. Now, let me point this out.
Please.
Liberals, 91-9. Democrats, 94-6.
Okay.
Right?
I'm not certain.
Moderates, 71-29. Conservatives, 21-79. I don't know how, if liberals are 91-9, that somehow or other the Democrats get to 94. When moderates and conservatives don't quite agree as much.
Nelson Rockefeller answered.
Something like that. White college, 60-40. White no degree, 44-55. That's 44% of white don't agree. So the point I'm trying to make here is that you're not expecting the GOP to have a majority of people saying that Trump is responsible for the violence. But if you get 20% of that party, if you get 44% of white don't agree who agree with that, that's significant.
It is a start. I guess the follow-up question is, and do you like violence?
And who are you going to vote for?
If they said yes, and I'm glad that he did it, well, okay, that explains some of it too.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed in Trump because he didn't encourage violence enough.
Or not enough violence. He didn't punch anybody. He didn't get up and walk to the Capitol when they wouldn't drive him. If 20% of the Republican Party is saying he encouraged violence, and that's a bad thing, and I don't like it, and I don't want to vote for people who do that, and that's the implication, then great. But some percentage of those people are saying, yeah, he did. He encouraged violence.
Well,
I
look,
was
some percentage of the 79% of the GOP who don't agree with that statement, some percentage of them aren't going to vote for Trump.
Yeah. And some percentage of them couldn't figure out how the phone worked.
Right.
So
I keep
pushing
the VCR controller and the phone won't stop ringing. I don't understand.
Yeah, the answer is 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
Right, I suppose.
Interesting.
Anyway,
good.
That's
good
it for today.
All right.
I'll come back tomorrow. We'll do it again.
Very good. Yeah, that's right. Every day feels like Thursday now, but we have another day, another shot at this tomorrow, so it doesn't matter that there were still a few more things that need discussion, and of course, more things will get in the way tomorrow. That's what's great about the news.
That's what's great about tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. It's always coming. So, all right. Well, thanks very much, Greg. That brings us pretty much to the top of the hour. Not quite to the music yet, but I think that...
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Well, you don't have to. Your hour is up, and you can, if you want to take it for the next hour, that's fine. If you don't want to, you're free to shout out the window.
You can do it. You're good at this.
Okay. We'll find out what comes next after this. There is still plenty out there. I'm still kind of puzzling over a couple of things from the last couple of days. But now that I know that Mike Pence had a rally...
There's a split on Kagro in the morning. Right. One guy's staying and the other guy's leaving.
Right. Irreconcilable differences. Civil war. So, all right. Well, that's true. And I guess the guy who stays gets to write the history of it. So, yay, I win. See you tomorrow, Greg. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, as I was hinting at just before the break, yes, I've been thinking a little bit more about it, and I discussed it at some length already, so we don't need to go back into it, but I'm still puzzled about this and still would like some clarification and still think that this might be a point of inquiry both for members of the January 6th committee if they don't already know the answer, and reporters if the January 6th people do know the answer and aren't sharing it or whatever. But puzzled by Mike Pence, now that I know he's had a rally. He's back in the news as far as I'm concerned. And I've been thinking again about all the reporting that came out of the last hearing and actually preceded the last hearing because they already had this news, which was that, look at this. I have to put this aside for later just in case this is a major story. Hold on a second. If I just click on open link, will it do it in... yeah, okay, great. All right, pardon me while I talk to myself. And then now I'll head back to the topic I was going to bring up. Mike Pence... what? Where was I? Yes, right. About Mark Milley. Is it Mark? Yeah, General Milley saying in his testimony, praising Mike Pence for taking charge on January 6th, and as he said, issuing unambiguous orders to send the military to the Capitol. That he had been there were all the kinds of adjectives that you would hope would attach to a leader of the free world and the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces, that he was decisive and unambiguous and forthright and clear and in his convictions, etc., etc. And we did question, lots of people questioned at the time, well, how is it that Mike Pence is issuing military orders? The vice president apparently has no place in the actual military chain of command. And we only kind of slightly touched on it the first day that it came up, and I think Greg may even have suggested that maybe there was some hint to Milley that that Pence was saying, Trump is just unfit for command at this point. He's not doing anything and doesn't want to do anything, and so I'm stepping in. And it's interesting that Milley, goes out of his way to say all these great things about how decisive Pence was, but Milley's not particularly decisive about saying, did Mr. Decisive say at some point, was he clear and unambiguous? Did he say not only that he's issuing orders, but did he say, I'm doing this because I'm relieving the president of command? Like, I don't even know if that's a thing you can do. You can relieve, I know there's a procedure out there under military law that you can relieve superior officers of command under certain circumstances, and there are things you're supposed to do and say in order to trigger all of that. I don't know if it applies to the commander-in-chief. I don't know if it's the vice president who's supposed to or is empowered in some way to do that, but it's brought into sharper focus by the fact that we're all talking about Pence not having any authority under the Constitution or anywhere else to do what Trump asked him to do, to steal the election, to delay or overturn the results of the Electoral College votes, but that he's perfectly willing, when I guess his neck is on the line, to act in ways for which he has no authority constitutionally and issue orders for the military. Which, again, I can understand. I mean, they are totally different situations, and it's worth pointing out that there are a couple differences, not just that one. There is, the fact that your neck is on the line. That does make it slightly different, but not particularly admirable. But on the other hand, on the one hand, you're being asked to ignore the fact that you have no authority to do a thing that is terrible and that you shouldn't be doing, overturning the election. And on the other hand, the question of, what will you do if you have no constitutional authority to do this thing that might be the right thing to do, to step in and to say the military ought to be dispatched to the Capitol. The fact that the current president refuses to do so is a bad thing, and I'm stepping in to remedy a deficiency. Okay, fine. So I can understand it in those terms, and I think that, removes all the mystery. But, again, it's a question of constitutional authority, so I'm thinking that there needs to be some sort of formality here. And Milley has said, all of his testimony was geared towards saying how clear and unambiguous and forthright Pence was being in issuing the orders, and it either means that part of that clarity and unambiguity, I don't know, is it's implied Pence saying, I know that I don't have ordinarily legal authority to issue these orders, but I'm doing so regardless. And the question is, did he just leave it at that? And Milley says, understood. Or did he say, he was clear and unambiguous. Did he say, I am relieving the president of command here? He's not up to the task of defending this Capitol. And I believe that constitutionally that's something that needs to be done. And I'm stepping in, and for purposes of command of the military, I am acting president at this point. So the question is, does he need to invoke something? Does he need to say something out loud? Does Milley require that he say, I'm relieving the president of command? Because if any of that is said, that needs to come out. Somebody needs to say that Donald Trump was relieved of command on January 6th, because that's a bombshell of a story. Then, I imagine he danced around it, which I understand that too. Like, I don't really know how this is supposed to go. And it might not even be necessary for me to do this. If General Milley is going to say, I understand. If the Secretary of Defense is going to say, I understand and I hear you and I'm going to dispatch the military. That's what we're after here. The formalities of why they agreed to listen to me don't really need to be settled. You could just as easily say, look, the right thing to do here is to dispatch the troops. The fact that we didn't settle the ambiguity of why Pence thinks he has authority, it was all just understood, and we all agreed to nod. But then that's, why not stick with procedure? Why not say, I need you to say, sir, that you're relieving the president of command on this? And maybe Milley said so, and Pence said, really, at this point, at in where we are today, at this very moment, you're asking me about formalities, you're going to have me sign documents and cross T's and dot I's, so you could see him jumping out of the way. But you could also see him saying, I understand what you're feeling, but remember what you're asking me for here. Relieving the president of command through no particular authority. Not the 25th Amendment, though you're considering that and won't do it. And that's interesting too, right? I'm considering that, but I won't do it. But I'm calling the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and deploying the military on my own authority. And I'm also, if basically what it comes down to, if he's issuing all these orders and he's so forthright and unambiguous and clear and resolute, but avoids saying, I am taking control here. As of now, I'm in charge here at the White House, or whatever it is that Alexander Haig said, and saying, I am relieving the president of authority. Then we're back to, yeah, you're a bit of a coward after all. You won't just say, how, or at least certainly forthright and unambiguous aren't among the adjectives I would use to describe the situation. I know you knew what you wanted, but that I can explain just out of self-interest. You wanted to not be assassinated by the crowd. That's, good idea, but not particularly admirable in any way. And, so resolute and forthright. Yeah, trying to save your life. Okay, well, I'll be resolute and forthright about that too. But when it comes to telling you why you need to listen to me and what's really going on and why, I guess I have questions about that, and I have questions about, did Milley at any point say, am I supposed to execute these orders? What am I supposed to do with this thing? He must have known, as it was being said to him, that there was something wrong with getting orders from the vice president. And he may have made them. And so the question is, did they just, everybody agree to look the other way and make the mental leap because it was clearly needed? Or was there an understanding? Or did somebody actually say, I'm taking over? Now, there was a little bit of speculation about this reflected back to me on Twitter by 1% Better on Twitter, who saw I'm reiterating this thing and saying, I grabbed an old tweet from some news channel. Milley said Pence gave him, quote, unambiguous orders to send the military to the Capitol, an order Trump himself would not give. I comment on it. Was he clear and unambiguous about relieving Trump of command? Because otherwise, Pence had no more authority to issue military commands than he had to overturn or delay the electoral votes, and that has to be clarified. Then an interesting comment from Nicholas Smith, who tweets, the handle is using the address, Nicholas Seattle, says, ironically, tongue-in-cheek, I'm amazed there was a coup in the middle of the coup, which really is exactly how you ought to think about it. It's just one coup was better than the other, I suppose. 1% Better then chimes in and actually expands on this and says, well, did Trump actually do anything in between January 6th and January 20th? I mean, I know this isn't odd for Trump to, not be doing anything at all, but maybe he was relieved of command on the 6th and they just won't say. That's a good point. And he includes some screen grabs of pictures of the Biden inauguration, and reminds us with the headline right next to it, the other screen grab, Mike Pence attends inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as Trump retreats to Mar-a-Lago. Okay, well, we all remember that, but we all sort of chalked it up to, well, that's Trump being a petulant child and refusing to accept defeat. That's just what Trump would ordinarily do. But then again, it's also the truth that it is the outgoing president who attends the inauguration of the incoming president. That is the way it is done. Mike Pence attended. Donald Trump did not. Ordinarily, we chalk that up to Trump's petulance, but for the fact that hanging out there is this testimony that on January 6th, a few days, 14 days, 2 weeks before the inauguration, a conversation took place between the Vice President of the United States and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the upshot of which is that the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff begins taking and executing military orders from the person that we all thought was the Vice President of the United States and nothing more, except for President of the Senate, and then turned out to be, for the purpose of issuing orders, acting President of the United States of America. How interesting. Now, there's another thing that 1% better grabs, I guess, from the report that he was using the headline from, and it's just this one-liner that says he's, quote, like a ghost in his own White House, said a White House official. In the last days, he was president, but not quite present. Maybe he wasn't president. Although, again, that's something we really ought to get clarity on. 2 weeks of having a totally different president of the United States. Maybe someone should talk about this. I don't know. And then one last tweet in which 1% Better says, his denials are admissions, and illustrated with what looks like a clip from maybe Politico. It looks like their type. Trump, and a quote from Trump, I'm at, quote, zero risk, unquote, of removal by 25th Amendment. Democrats are voting to request Pence to remove the president by the 25th Amendment before moving to impeachment on Wednesday. You remember that brief episode, too. Wouldn't that be something, of course, if he was, in fact, already removed, not by the 25th Amendment, but having been relieved of command. And I'm not certain that that obviates all of his powers of the presidency, but certainly if there's a formal relief of command as military commander, I mean, is it severable from the rest of the powers of the presidency? And if so, I don't know. I guess there's still the same analysis whether it's severable from the rest of the powers of the presidency or not. Is there a newly created method of removal from office involved here? Can the vice president relieve the president of command? Like the whole thing? Is it impeachment can remove you from office? The 25th Amendment can remove you from office. Can you also just be flatly relieved of command? Does it have to be a battlefield type decision? Could it be about anything? I don't know. I'd be reluctant to say any court would find that power to exist constitutionally. But then again, there clearly has to be a method of relieving someone in the military chain of command if that becomes necessary. And I would guess that courts would say, all right, well, it's just severable from the rest of executive power. You can still be president, but having been relieved of command of the military. But it is kind of an inherent power of the presidency. It's something for all of the presidential scholars and constitutional scholars to get together and chat about. There's plenty for them to talk about. Let's see. Other things to bring up that I think might be of some interest and that's stuck here in pocket for us to discuss. Let's see. First of all, everybody also chatting about, and we really haven't gotten to it, we've left it aside for now, 2:10:15 87 stories about the let's see. The non-investigation or the absence of any real news about the so-called investigation into the leak of the draft opinion in Dobbs that was supposedly taking place in the Supreme Court. And all Republicans were horribly, offended by this and were terribly incensed, and they wanted to get to the bottom of it and insinuated that it was a liberal justice or liberal justice's clerk who had leaked this, even though there was no tactical way to explain why a liberal would have leaked this, and plenty of tactical explanation for why a conservative would have leaked it. And I think we really haven't moved off of that, and mainstream opinion still seems to be landing on the idea that it really was one of the conservatives, or someone connected to one of the conservatives, who did the leaking. And two major reports in the last day or two, maybe a third even here in pocket somewhere, separated by a little bit of time, about the fact that they've come to nothing with this in terms of the investigation. And it's beginning to look like, having demanded an investigation and perhaps having found through that investigation that the leak was more likely from among the conservative camp than the liberal camp, that Chief Justice John Roberts is kind of now saying, not so important that we actually get and announce a conclusion to this investigation after all. Let's see. CNN has a headline of the inside story of how John Roberts failed to save abortion rights. They take a slightly different angle there, and talk about the tactics of the leaks. And then Rolling Stone with a slightly similar headline. John Roberts was lobbying Kavanaugh to save Roe, and then the draft opinion leak, trying to explain how, I guess, CNN's angle is on step one here, that John Roberts is trying to move Kavanaugh off of the majority in Dobbs and onto a patchwork majority that will either decide the other way on Dobbs, or at least, as Roberts was looking for, perhaps rule in favor of the Dobbs side of the docket, I guess. I don't even remember where everybody stood, but possibly upholding, was it the Missouri law, but at the same time making it explicit that they weren't going to overrule Roe. I guess Roberts felt there was room to do that, and he was hoping Kavanaugh would join him, and he ultimately did not. And so, CNN taking the angle of here's how Roberts tried to do this, and Rolling Stone coming straight out with saying it was by trying to move Kavanaugh, and then the draft opinion leaked, and that by most accounts, people thought that it made more sense as an explanation that conservatives would have leaked it, and that Kavanaugh was meant to be frightened out of joining Roberts in the middle to oppose simply abandoning the Roe framework entirely and overturning it by public pressure. But it was going to look like the leak had somehow made him cave, and he preferred that the leak make him look more resolute in his opposition to abortion, and went that way. But what is not stated in all these things, because I guess we're just not there by way of enough proof for fact checkers and editors to let their reporters simply say it, but they're certainly leaning hard towards the idea, as they also, these same outlets also run stories that say it's curious, this was the worst thing ever, and they totally had to get to the bottom of it at some point. But then it was like, not so important that we actually conclude anything anymore. The implication is, Roberts was trying to move people over, and maybe it was a reaction to his work that the leak came about. And you got to wonder, okay, a lot of people were speculating, it could be Clarence Thomas or Ginny Thomas, perhaps even more likely, or someone connected to them who was trying to keep Kavanaugh in their camp. So what if it was, right? Supposing they find out conclusively, Ginny Thomas admits to it, privately, and or even under investigation, under oath, and now the Supreme Court is faced with the prospect of doing something with this information. Does John Roberts just reveal the information that would lead to renewed calls for Justice Thomas's impeachment? It might not be successful, but why take that risk? Why even have people openly talking about it? Why be the first would he be the first Supreme Court justice to be seriously threatened with impeachment? Would he be the first one impeached? He'd certainly be the first one removed from office if that were the case, but I don't think they have the votes to do that. But I don't know, I feel like there was one way back when that at least got to the impeachment stage, but may have been acquitted, and it's in the recesses of my mind here. But perhaps one of you knows, and I'm being less than courageous here, just like yesterday when I was trying to remember what's the written Persian language, right? What's it called? And I was like, I think it's Farsi, but I'm afraid of saying it because I'll offend everybody. Yeah, you're so stupid. Farsi is spoken by someone else, not them, and you're mixing up all your Central Asian, Middle Eastern languages, and how offensive is that? But it turns out it was Farsi, but I'm sitting there frozen, better not say it. What if it's Urdu and I say Farsi, and oh my God. Okay, so here too I'm thinking there was, all right, I better look it up. Maybe I can look that up and see if there's any information about Supreme Court justices. And I don't know why Salmon Chase's name is in mind here. Is that what it is? There it is. Yeah. Okay. Impeachment trial of Justice Samuel. Okay. Yeah. Did I say that right? I said Salmon. Salmon P. Chase is what I'm thinking of. This is Samuel Chase, and I don't know if it's the same family. Who's Salmon Chase? Is there Salmon Chase? Am I crazy? Was he the Secretary of State that bought Alaska for Lincoln? Or all right, hang on, look this up. Too many things floating around in my head. That was his middle initial, right? Wasn't it? Salmon P. Chase. Salmon P. Chase, former Chief Justice of the United States. Nothing to do with that whatsoever. Seward was the one who bought Alaska. Seward's Folly, right? Okay, see, there's too much stuff rattling around in my head. So Salmon P. Chase, Chief Justice, but Samuel Chase, 1804 to 1805 is the impeachment trial. Salmon Chase is Chief Justice when? Late 1800s? Okay. Well, and by the way, it says here that is he on the $10,000 bill? I didn't even realize that. Okay. Well, at any rate, Salmon P. Chase. Oh, look at this. What was Salmon P. Chase's role in Lincoln's cabinet? While serving a second term in the U.S. Senate, he was tapped by Lincoln to become Secretary of the Treasury. So, okay, he was Secretary of something as well. Are they related? I don't know. That I'm not going to look up. Someone else can do that work. But yes, the impeachment trial of Justice Samuel Chase, 1804 to 1805. For the third time in its brief history, the Senate began preparations for an impeachment trial. So, wow, lots of impeachments in the early days. They probably thought that was going to be happening all the time. But Salmon Chase had served on the Supreme Court, had a volcanic personality, according to the United States Senate historical page. Okay. Well, very interesting. All right. That tells me nothing about the news angle of what I was supposed to be talking about, but does settle the issue that was rattling around in my head. Anyway, let's take a look here. Maybe we'll start with the CNN piece, the inside story of how Roberts failed to save abortion rights. But yeah, the reason I was bringing up the impeachment thing at all in the first place was supposing conclusive evidence had come to Roberts in his investigation that Thomas was connected to or somehow to blame for the leak. Would he really say anything? Because that would really leave no alternative but to impeach a sitting member of the court, and at a time when the credibility of the court is in serious question, you would think that this poor sap Roberts, trying to save his legacy and save his court, would say, well, I'll do anything to avoid that. And it reminded me a little bit of like the rules, I mean, again, off topic, but the rules for arming teachers in the classroom, where they say a million things about what, how important it is that everybody follow the rules, and you're definitely not going to be allowed to carry your gun in the classroom unless you follow all these safety protocols. And then they don't follow the safety protocols, but ultimately they do nothing, because the alternative is to take away that thing which everybody says makes that classroom safe, so they're never going to do it. A similar situation here. It's not about safety, but obviously just politically, Roberts can't handle the idea of having to be honest about somebody who really needs to be removed for bad behavior from the court. All right, got to take our break. Be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. A little bit late in coming back. We were a little bit late in starting the music, and so I was waiting for the right point in the music to come around to let you know that the show was back, but we were back. Let's read a little bit of the CNN story about this. There's so many other things I realize we need to get to, and we wasted too much time on which chase we were talking about, but that was clearly not... that issue had to be settled, or I couldn't move forward with what was going on. So, what about this? The inside story of how John Roberts failed to save abortion rights, and they should never have been in his hands, but apparently that was the case. Joan Biskupich, is that how she pronounces her name? CNN legal analyst. So you've probably seen her on TV, and you probably know. She's probably said it several times, but I don't watch live, so I'll never know. That's my best guess. What's more important is what she has to say about the situation, I think. Chief Justice John Roberts privately lobbied fellow conservatives to save the constitutional right to abortion down to the bitter end. But May's unprecedented leak of a draft opinion reversing Roe v. Wade made the effort all but impossible, multiple sources familiar with negotiations told CNN. It appears unlikely that Roberts' best prospect, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, was ever close to switching his earlier vote, despite Roberts' attempt that continued through the final weeks of the session. New details obtained by CNN provide insight into the high-stakes internal abortion rights drama that intensified in late April when justices first learned that the draft opinion would soon be published. Serious conflicts over the fate of the 1973 Roe case were then accompanied by tensions over an investigation into the source of the leak that included obtaining cell phone data from law clerks and some permanent court employees. In the past, Roberts himself has switched his vote, or persuaded others to do so, toward middle ground, a middle ground institutionalist outcome, such as saving the Affordable Care Act. It's a pattern that has generated suspicion among some right-wing justices and conservatives outside the court. Multiple sources told CNN that Roberts' overtures this spring, particularly to Kavanaugh, raised fears among conservatives and hope among liberals that the chief would change the outcome in the most closely watched case in decades. Once the draft was published by Politico, conservatives pressed their colleagues to try to hasten release of the final decision, lest anything suddenly threaten their majority. Roberts' persuasive efforts difficult even from the start, were thwarted by the sudden public nature of the state of play. He can usually work in private, seeking and offering concessions without anyone beyond the court knowing how he or other individual justices have voted or what they might be writing. Kavanaugh had indicated during December oral arguments that he wanted to overturn Roe, and CNN learned that he voted that way in a private justices' conference session soon afterward. But the 2018 appointee of former President Donald Trump, who had been confirmed by the Senate only after expressing respect for Roe, has wavered in the past and been open to Roberts' persuasion. The two men have known each other since the early 1990s when they both worked in the George H.W. Bush administration. Roberts, who is 67 and 10 years older than Kavanaugh, was a deputy U.S. Solicitor General at the time, and Kavanaugh a new attorney. They share similar Roman Catholic roots, prep school backgrounds, and Ivy League educations. Roberts at Harvard, Kavanaugh at Yale. They now live so close to each other in Maryland that abortion rights protesters sometimes go to both homes in the same evening. Conservatives anticipated Roberts' actions is the next section, explaining, I guess, why they might have been the ones to release this. The High Court's June 24th ruling in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization struck America like a thunderbolt. Despite the leaked preview on May 2nd, the decision has caused confusion among women and healthcare providers and spurred action in state legislatures, some trying to impose more restrictions on pregnant women, some trying to safeguard reproductive rights. It has unsettled the court in its own way, as the 5-4 ruling represented a startling departure from a half-century of precedent. Wasn't it 6-3? Was it 5-4, this one? It's not my recollection, but I could be thinking of any one of the absurd cases that they just dealt with. The final decision flouted the court's traditional adherence to judicial restraint and precedent. We know that, and that's what made it so absurd, but okay. Polls show public approval of the court falling significantly, as the decision has been regarded as a product of politics rather than neutral decision-making. Though it should also be pointed out that Roberts' efforts to change the outcome were certainly politics rather than neutral decision-making, too. Okay. Roberts' efforts directed toward Kavanaugh, and to a lesser extent the newest conservative justice, Amy Coney Barrett, were anticipated. Some anti-abortion activists and conservative movement figures had feared that Roberts would sway either Kavanaugh or Barrett from the draft opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito that was an all-out rejection of Roe and women's privacy rights. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, which has previously obtained inside information about conservative votes, had published an editorial on April 26th warning that Roberts, presumed to be working to save part of Roe, may be trying to turn another justice now. Roberts indeed was trying, according to CNN sources, who also revealed that by the end of April, or the end of that April week, that the justices discovered that the news organization Politico had obtained Alito's first draft of the Dobbs ruling from February. Roberts and his colleagues spent a few anxious days quietly awaiting publication of the document, stretching through the afternoon of May 2nd, when all 9 were together for a live-streamed memorial at the court for the late Justice John Paul Stevens. Politico first published its story about the draft that night at 8:32 p.m. Roberts launched an investigation into who might be behind this betrayal of the confidences of the court. He vowed that the court's work will not be affected in any way. And by the way, can I just say that I'm reminded here by this offhand comment that it happened on the same day that the justices were all together for a memorial at the court for John Paul Stevens, and saying, yes, that's right. And this stupid leak and investigation thing overshadowed the fact that, John Paul Stevens is dead and gone. That's actually would have been the biggest news of the day otherwise. Amazing how that erased it. But of course, it was most notably in diminishing whatever chance he had to dislodge the 5-justice block set to overturn Roe The aggressive leak investigation worsened the existing strains among the justices, their law clerks, and other employees in the 9 chambers. As CNN earlier reported, the court's marshal, there is one, Gail Curley, asked law clerks who serve the justices for 1-year terms to sign affidavits related to the leak and to turn over their cell phone data. She also obtained electronic devices, CNN recently learned, from some permanent employees who work closely with the justices. Friction among all intensified as protests began. Fencing and barricades were erected around the court, and some usual end-of-session lunches and parties were dropped. Aggravating everything and presenting the greatest consequence for all Americans was the emerging force of the court's right-wing supermajority, which, aside from abortion rights, included Roberts. The 6-3 court ruled boldly to enhance gun rights, favor religious conservatives, and diminish regulatory authority over the environment. Roberts helped steer several of those rulings. For the court's remaining 3 liberals, who held out some hope that the Chief Justice could moderate fellow conservatives on abortion rights, it was a defeat all around. Next section, Ginsburg's death, of course, opened the door to justices reconsidering Roe. We know about that. Obviously. Let's see. And then in the Texas, I'm going to skip to the next section and see, because what I'm truly interested in is the investigation of the leak and how it's kind of gone away. So to the extent that this discusses other things that we know about, we can just summarize. Texas Law SB 8 revealed conservatives' mindset. Oh, and by the way, there's news on that front. Of course, that's the bounty hunter law, I believe, and the one that gives people the right to sue privately if they find out that anybody has sought an abortion in violation of the 6-week ban that they had in Texas. The news there being that California and its Governor Gavin Newsom, and of course its legislature, which had to be the one to do this, have followed through on their initial threat to use this strange private bounty hunting provision that was used to evade the constitutional problems that a 6-week ban then had in Texas, but to use the same thing to evade responsibility for Supreme Court imposed protections on gun rights, essentially allowing private individuals to go bounty hunting and sue people who, I don't know exactly whether they have to have participated in the transaction that in a gun that's used in a crime, or just whether California would ban certain weapons and then prosecute anybody who sought to avoid those bans, either by importing guns from out of state or whatever it is. We'll have to get more details on that. But it was mentioned early on, and I guess they've actually gone ahead and formulated the legislation and signed it. So let's see. Back to the CNN article. This is about revealing the conservatives' mindset on the court, thanks to Texas Law SB 8 and their unwillingness to strike that down. And then next section, Alito draft leak seals the vote count. So back to that subject. The May 2nd disclosure of the first draft in Dobbs made an already difficult task nearly impossible. It shattered the usual secrecy of negotiations and likely locked in votes, if they were not already solid. To the extent that liberals had hoped that the original vote by conservatives would change, that hope faded. Meanwhile, CNN has learned Politico's disclosure accelerated the urgency of the conservative side to try to issue the opinion before any possible disruptions. As Roberts kept trying to prevent total reversal of Roe, 3 liberals worked on a joint dissent that recalled the 3-justice plurality opinion in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. They referred to the 3 justices who had 30 years earlier preserved Roe: Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy, and David Souter, all appointees of Republican presidents, as judges of wisdom. They would not have won any contests for the kind of ideological purity some court watchers want justices to deliver. Justices Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan wrote, but if there were awards for justices who left this court better than they found it, and who for that reason left this country better, and the rule of law stronger, sign those justices up. In the end, Roberts wrote alone. He concurred in the majority's decision to uphold Mississippi's 15-week ban, but called its repudiation of Roe a serious jolt to the legal system. With a rare note of personal uncertainty, Roberts added, both the court's opinion and the dissent display a relentless freedom from doubt on the legal issue that I cannot share. Okay, well, so splitting the hairs there. I was going to say splitting the baby, but that's probably inappropriate in this discussion. But at any rate, I found that somewhat interesting. But I guess, like I said, there's still a step or two away from just simply concluding, yeah, the truth is that the reason you're not going to hear any more about the investigation is that it's going to reveal that it wasn't the people that all the conservatives said it was. That once again, every Republican accusation was a confession, and it was Republican fingerprints on the leak. I'm betting that still comes out to be true. All right, let's see. Oh, I should make a note to myself about finding the California vigilante gun lawsuits or bounty hunters article and sharing it with you. I'd be surprised. Surprisingly, I don't think I saw it in Pocket anywhere, but I know I retweeted something about it just the other day and should really revisit that topic. Okay, let's see. Gosh, there's another 10 or 15 things that I feel like need to be shared. Let me jump down to this one, which has been sitting in Pocket for a while because it came in the form of a tweet, and the tweets don't display in Pocket. So I opened it up and found out what it was. And oh, yes, there's an article that accompanies it, too. This is a tweet from back at the end of last week. Sarah Lynch, who covers the Justice Department for Reuters, had the tweet of the breaking news. And let's see, who had the story to accompany it? Was it Sarah's own story, or did I find it elsewhere? I got it from The Hill, although The Hill was probably aggregating that as well. The news being, I'll give Sarah the credit for her breaking news tweet, the D.C. Bar Office of Disciplinary Counsel for the D.C. Bar Association has filed ethics charges against Jeffrey Clark. I'm giving his Twitter handle in the tweet here, too, so to make sure that he saw it. So guess what? You're being charged. Here's the Reuters story of it, I guess, rather than going to the Hill's version of it. The Hill gets plenty of attention, so we'll use Reuters. Exclusive by Sarah Lynch. Two former U.S. There's a pop-up in my way. Two former U.S. officials help ethics probe of Trump ally Clark, source says. Interesting. So this is actually an older article, so maybe I will go to the Hill. March 29th. So there was an ethics probe going on, but the new news from last week was that charges have been filed. So over to the Hill. Ex-Trump DOJ lawyer Jeffrey Clark hit with legal ethics charge over post-election role. Rebecca Bache and John Krusel and Chloe Fulmar are the writers here. I took a wild guess at Rebecca's last name. Hope I'm close. Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department attorney, you remember him, at the center of the former President Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election results, was hit Friday with ethics charges alleging that his role in the post-election effort amounted to a breach of legal ethics. The charges, filed by the District of Columbia Bar Office of Disciplinary Counsel, sets in motion disciplinary proceedings over allegations that Clark engaged in dishonest conduct and sought to interfere with the administration of justice, and will culminate in findings that could affect Clark's D.C. law license. Clark, who specialized in environmental law at the Department of Justice, attempted to send a letter to Georgia officials pushing the state to suspend certification of its 2020 election results until the Justice Department investigated fraud claims, despite agency leaders saying such claims were without merit. After former Attorney General William Barr resigned in December of 2020, Clark pushed Trump to nominate him to lead the Justice Department and pursue the president's false election claims. Clark said that if selected as acting Attorney General, he would send the letter to state legislatures, despite warnings from fellow Justice Department lawyers about incorrect information. The former mid-level agency official has been a prominent feature of the House January 6 Select Committee's hearings. The panel asked Clark to meet with the committee, but voted to hold him in contempt in December after he walked out of a meeting the previous month. Clark eventually met with the committee in February, where he asserted his Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. So, I don't know. We'll see what comes of it. I don't know what value there might be from the earlier article about there being an investigation and that, two former U.S. officials helped the ethics probe of Clark, and I wonder if they are Jeffrey Rosen and Richard Donahue, I guess, each have given voluntary interviews in recent months to the District of Columbia Office of Disciplinary Counsel, which is investigating Clark. So, yeah, they've spoken not only to the January 6th committee, but talked to the disciplinary office about Clark. So, well, there you go. And for all the reasons, I think, it looks like cited in the Hills article about it. So, okay, our obligation to let you know about that and keep you up to date on the charges against him, I think, is discharged. Lots of other things to add to the mix, and I'm trying to see what might be most wise in terms of pulling them from the pile here. I couldn't tell you. Let's see. We'll just go back up to the top. Perhaps we'll share this, because this was in the news today, too. And it always pays to stay relatively current when you can. A write-up in the Washington Post about Ron DeSantis's wacko spokeswoman, and there are several of them, but the chief wacko spokeswoman, Christina Pushaw, whose name has been called on the show previously. Interesting that she's profiled here, this, a light roasting, I guess you might say, in this profile, but other people have dismissed this profile as far too cushy, far too soft on her, and in fact an elevation of this lunatic Christina Pushaw, and a dangerous mistake to kind of mainstream her and normalize what she's doing. So I don't know, let's read it and see what we think. DeSantis spokeswoman Christina Pushaw makes sure reporters feel the burn. Known for her aggressive Twitter comments and brusque treatment of the media, the Florida governor's press secretary has used taunts to solidify a tough image. So you can see what they're talking about here, right? Like, should they have normalized this? Shouldn't it be a story about how her behavior is completely unacceptable? Except that, I don't know, that ends up just being weak sauce too. Oh my goodness, it's completely unacceptable. But she'll continue to do it and continue to have his backing, and people will continue to report on the dumb, crazy things she says, as though it's okay for gubernatorial spokespeople to do this. When Florida Republicans held their annual conference last week, party leaders decided to bar a large swath of the press corps from the event, right? Greg alluded to this earlier. While the hosts declined to discuss their reasoning, one unelected official applauded it. My message to journalists is to try crying about it, tweeted Christina Pushaw, whose job as spokeswoman for Governor Ron DeSantis is to communicate with reporters. Then go to kickboxing and have a margarita. Okay, which I guess that's her confession. That's what she does in her spare time. I guess when she's not, from the looks of it, maybe having operations on her lips. I don't know. That's kind of odd. She always did look like kind of weird. Oh, by the way, we're reading the piece by Paul Farhi, Farhi. He's a reporter on this story. But that's interesting. My message to journalists: go cry about it. Just echoed the other day by Matt Gaetz, who we're used to being this kind of a wacko, making comments, about, like I just did, making comments about a woman's appearance. So, maybe we're not so far apart on that thing, but I'm trying not to be totally malicious about it. But he was also attacking a 19-year-old young woman, who really should be restricted from access to in general. But he, of course, making the calculated comment of saying, how come all the women who scream about abortion rights are ugly and fat and no one would want to have sex with them anyways? Basically what he's saying here. And he said it in pretty much those words. I can't remember his exact quote, but anyway, asked about whether or not, what would you say? Interesting reporter coverage of this. Well, do you think those remarks were offensive? Yes, possibly they were offensive. Well, what would you say to people who find those words offensive? And he says, be offended. What does he care, right? They were never voting for him in the first place. And he thinks this makes him look brash and brave and devil may care. And, well, like fellow Florida man, Christina Pushaw takes the same approach. We're going to bar the press from an annual conference of Florida Republicans. Well, you can't do that. We need to be able to have access. Well, if you're sad about it, maybe cry. That's really the answer. The derisive tone was typical of Pushaw, 31, a state employee who earns $120,000 a year. In the 14 months since joining DeSantis' staff, she has transformed the typically buttoned-down role of gubernatorial press secretary into something like a running public brawl, with Twitter as her blunt force weapon. Her usual targets: Democrats, the news media, and anyone else she deems insufficiently supportive of DeSantis' agenda and her own conservative politics. She has knocked the Washington Post as the Pravda of D.C., implied that Chelsea Clinton is a grifter. Well, see, again, every accusation is a confession. And referred to President Biden as, quote, a seemingly senile 79-year-old aspiring dictator. She invoked a notorious anti-Semitic trope about the Jewish Rothschild family while criticizing pandemic-related restrictions in November. She deleted that tweet after describing it as an attempt at sarcasm. In January, she questioned whether a neo-Nazi demonstration in Orlando was organized by Democratic staffers. She walked that one back, too. Pushaw's attacks on national news organizations and reporters can not only be blistering, one in which she called them slobbering regime sycophants, but they can also run on for hundreds of tweets and retweets, once prompting Twitter to suspend her account temporarily for abusive behavior. She's also been credited, or blamed, for helping make the incendiary term groomer mainstream in GOP circles. In early March, she used the word, once reserved to describe pedophile behavior, and she is describing pedophile behavior with that word now. She's simply saying, I literally am accusing these prominent Democrats of being pedophiles. Shouldn't let her go for that. Once reserved, it's still reserved, to describe pedophile behavior, to characterize anyone who opposed a DeSantis-favored bill restricting discussions of sexual orientation and gender in schools. If you're against the anti-grooming bill, you are probably a groomer, or at least you don't denounce the grooming of 4 to 8-year-old children, she tweeted. While conspiratorial QAnon followers had previously used the term groomer to tar their enemies, its use took off among conservative politicians and pundits after Pushaw's tweet, and has therefore been widely used to demonize Democrats and educators who discussed sexuality or gender identity with young children, or we should say, has also thereafter been widely used to demonize Democrats and educators who have not done any of those things, but are Democrats or educators and in opposition to DeSantis, and so just get tarred with the brush of groomer regardless. None of Pushaw's public dust-ups seems to have ruffled her boss, DeSantis, who is widely considered a leading contender to challenge former President Donald Trump for the 2024 GOP nomination. On occasion, he has defended Pushaw, who has loyally promoted his agenda, which has included a string of legislative victories on culture war issues, such as the passage of the gender discussion bill and a ban on teaching critical race theory. Pushaw not only amplifies DeSantis' pugnacious public posture, she sometimes takes it further. When the Archbishop of Miami rebuked DeSantis in February for a policy affecting shelters for migrant children, Pushaw responded on Twitter, lying is a sin. I guess supposedly it's the Archbishop, she says, who's the one who's lying. She tweeted this over a photo of the Archbishop and his comment about the shelter policy. She declined an interview request for this article, I guess, and suggested to her Twitter followers that the Post was trying to blackmail her by writing this profile, although she ultimately offered limited cooperation with the reporter. And we're a little behind in starting the music here. So let's wrap things up. Some think Pushaw's aggressive persona is strategic, acting as a kind of shield for DeSantis. She's the Dennis Rodman of Florida politics, said Peter Schorsch, the publisher of FloridaPolitics.com, referring to the NBA player who taunted his opponents to throw them off their game. Perhaps predictably, Pushaw has attracted plenty of attention. Since joining DeSantis, her Twitter following has grown more than tenfold to nearly 177,000 as of this week. That's a fraction of the 2 million plus followers that the White House press secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said DeSantis and DeSantis himself each command, but far more than any other gubernatorial press secretary. So, as I said, much more to this one and many more goofy pictures of Christina Pushaw to illustrate the point. You should probably take a look at it and read it for yourself and decide whether she was roasted enough over the flames here or whether this is, in fact, normalization and elevation of somebody who deserves to be shunned and pushed out of polite society. But that's happening all over the place these days, and you're used to it by now. Tell you what, though, Justice Putnam comes up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and he's got more information about all of these stories and much more to come, including former acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller contradicted Trump under oath.
From
NetworksRadio.com.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I guess about what happened and what Trump did or didn't do in terms of trying to tamp down on the riot on January 6th. I guess he's told two different stories at some point, some people say, but the important point is he contradicts Trump right now, and under oath at that. So stay tuned for that and much more from around the country and around the world, as is usually the case. Next.